moment just to talk to you about what's happened in the last week. It's been a pretty short sort of 8 days, but on the January the 29th, there was a mid-air collision between a Sikorsky helicopter and a Canadian regional jet operated by American Airlines subsidiary PSA coming into Washington, DC. And I just thought it would be an opportune time to sort of talk about maybe the breakdown of it, potential causes, and some of the things that I've noticed whilst having the opportunity to be sort of involved in a little bit in aviation within America, and seeing sort of two different sort of scopes, seeing how an ICAO operation functions back home in Australia, and also having a look at how they do things in America, and maybe some takeaways and things that may have led to the actual cause of this incident. And hopefully it doesn't happen again, but it's been quite a big sort of shock and a tragedy to everybody, because this has been the first airline crash in America since 2009. So I just thought, look, I'm just going to sit down, and if we can just go over it a little bit and just have a look. And there's a couple of good sort of clips that have already been produced, which I can talk about, and just go over some scenarios that I've sort of encountered, that, and maybe just give a couple of war stories and examples where I think there's a bit of a sort of a mismatch between commercial operations and perhaps what the military's doing in our airspace, when those two worlds sort of have competing interests. So anyway, I just want to go through and look, I'll just read a bit of a screed as to what's happened. So January 29, 2025, a military Black Hawk collided with American Airlines Flight 5342, as I stated earlier, operated by PSA Airlines as American Eagle. So the American Eagle would be the call sign for that. And it was a Bombardier CRJ 700. Takes just short of about 75 to 78 passengers from what I've read. And it's a regional jet that includes, I think it's about 78, including the crew. So at this point anyway, there was a 64 on the airliner, and it says 3 on the helicopter, which we'll talk about in a second. The American Airlines was on final approach after departing Wichita Dwight Eisenhower Airport in Kansas. And the helicopter crew was performing a required annual flight evaluation out of Davison, Army Airfield in Virginia. Preliminary data shows a collision likely occurred at an altitude of 325 feet. For those that don't know, which is 99 meters, so 100 meters up above the earth. So very, there's buildings that are obviously, you're probably talking, a 10-story high building, let's say a little bit higher. There was a single air traffic controller that was managing both aircraft at the time of the crash. An arrangement that has been deemed not normal. Has been deemed not normal by potential FAA standards, but we'll have a look at that as well. The Bombardier was 20-year-old regional jet. It's commonly used for short-haul connection flights. So this one's an American flight, partnered airline. So the main legacy air carriers would be, these regional jets will fly into a smaller little airport and then go to a main hub like Washington, where other larger aircraft potentially will take them overseas or longer haul sort of flights. It can be just used as a commute between capital cities as well. It's still got fairly good range, that aircraft. So if we just have a look at this little clip that I've got here, it just sort of shows the breakdown. And then I just wanted to sort of discuss, while I can, some incidents that I've had and borne witness to that I think are potentially something that maybe needs to be open for discussion as well, and just to give you a bit of an update. So I know that I've been trying to pick up and do like a bit of an interview format for the HellX channel. And whilst I've got you here, if you can please like and subscribe, and I'll try and get some more content out pretty much rapid fire. Sort of, I want to just go to this format where I can just sort of have a chat to you. My background anyway, just for you guys that don't know, I've spent 20 years basically state and federal government back in Australia. Was a previously a detective, and now I've had the fortunate opportunity to sort of move into the aviation sector. So, and like I said to you earlier, seeing it from different sort of countries and how they operate, for good, bad, or the other. But yeah, if we can just hit that like button, hit the subscribe, and any comments are appreciated. And hopefully we can sort of go on a bit of a journey together, because I've got a lot of, I suppose, experience in different facets when it comes to crime investigation, when it comes to, potentially some border issues that are sort of topical at the moment, dealing with government agencies, aviation, like we're talking about here. So I can give you some firsthand sort of, I suppose, war stories as well as we go along, and just break down some of this stuff. So I like the title of this clip is in the background. I'm sorry about the glare that's on that screen, but you should be right with it. I might just paraphrase some of this stuff, and you may not be able to hear it, but then we can just talk about it. So this is just giving a breakdown. The aircraft, if you can see in the screen there, it took off from Wichita and then tracked out towards Washington. And as it comes along, basically the aircraft will be flying what we call a set published approach arrival. So it'll have a set arrival that the aircraft will be flying into. And unfortunately, you can see. So the aircraft will have a set procedure that it's going to follow, a bit like a train on a railway track. And at the same time, a military helicopter, such as the one that's pictured up here, a Black Hawk. You can see this one potentially is all kitted out with the latest sort of probably weather radars and night navigation equipment. And my understanding is, and that this will come out hopefully in the report, is that the crew that are operating this one were actually wearing our night vision goggles. So that's another factor as well. And I've had some experience in the Army Reserves, and I've used night vision, so I can see there's benefits to it, and there's obviously limitations to that as well. That could be a factor at play. But anyway, so these two aircraft are departing. One's doing a night exercise and basically a license renewal, is what my understanding. And here you can see as they're coming along, as they approach this sort of river section, here's your airport here. If you can see the mouse, just basically around here is the airport, and the jet is going to come in, either land on this runway here, or there's another runway over here, which is 33. Within the last minute, which is a major factor in my view, is that the pilots were asked are they able to now change, the pilots of the jet, are you able to change from this other runway, which I can have a look and tell you what that is exactly, to runway 33 for a visual approach. And they basically have come back and said, yeah, look, we can do that. That's okay. We can have a look. And anyway, so as I basically was saying, that this aircraft was coming down, and having a look at the charts, which is basically what the pilots would have been looking at as well. Here is there would have been an option for 01, which I'm assuming that they were probably prepped for and going to land on. And that's the longer of the runways. That's 7,169 feet long. At the last minute, they've been asked, can you now take runway 33 on a visual approach, which is 5,204 feet long. And this is already starting to be a threat from before the Black Hawk even arrives. And this is something that I wanted to talk about, because we've definitely got a bit of a disconnect between what I see in ICAO operations, basically back home in Australia, and what the Americans seem to do here, which is a common thing, is that they'll be on a published arrival, a procedure basically on railway tracks. And then at the last minute, for speed and efficiency, the air traffic controller will say, can you see the runway? Can you see the airport? And if you reply yes, they're going to say, yep, you're fine to go. I want you to just do a visual approach. Can you change runways? Can you turn left? Can you turn right? Can you do all of these things now that are outside of that protection of that arrival procedure? So that comes with a enormous increase in risk, and there's no one that can argue that. Like, I'm not here to claim to be an expert in any of these topics, but definitely between a published star arrival going on to a published approach is way safer. There's a lot more protections at play in terms of speed, configuring the aircraft, even just your stability when you're turning and, you know, getting onto that final center line for the runway is way safer and premeditated than it would be if you're just given a visual at the last second. So this is what's happened here, is that the traffic controller has said to them, look, can you now switch? I'm assuming they were lined up for 01 here. Can you now come a little bit more to the right and take runway 33? It's shorter. Now you're going to extend out and you're going to turn right on a base leg. You're visual now. You're not in the protection of that procedure. And potentially unbeknownst to you, you've got, which you will have some warning potentially, this black cork is coming at your screen in a traffic sort of collision advisory. So you will have like a little notification that there is an aircraft out there heading your way. But again, you're on short final, you're on an approach. So another factor I wanted to point out as well here is that when you now get taken off that arrival and change runways, you have to go into the online onboard computer of the aircraft, and one of the pilots is now programming that new arrival, because there'll be different landing numbers potentially for that that runway 33 approach. And usually you'll try to still back it up with a published procedure to give you sort of lateral and vertical guidance as you come down onto that runway. So now you've got a late change, and you've also probably got one pilot whose head is now not visually outside scanning for other aircraft or keeping situational awareness. They're down trying to program this, potentially briefing it, and the pilot who's flying is now also splitting their time now between the arrival, coming into land, making sure it's configured, and listening to a quick brief from this other pilot potentially to say, look, this is where we are, this is the runway, these numbers are in, etc., etc. So all of these things are going to happen, and the other one, the pilot who's not flying, is now also thinking about, oh, okay, the whole taxi plan that we had to arrive to our gate has now changed because I'm on a different runway, I'm going to come off at a different exit, etc., etc. So all of these factors have now compounded before we even get to the Black Hawk. So this is something that I think I've sort of drawn up on a bit of a whiteboard here, just some of the factors and the issues, you know, military versus commercial airspace, the FAA ATC culture. And here I've got it up highlighted, a visual approach. And then eventually we'll go on in the next sort of thing and look at military ops and their culture. And I've had a little bit of exposure, obviously not flying, but in relation to what their doctrine is and what their mindset is. And then we'll look at Part 121 SOPs, unfortunately the victims and the other people that are affected by this, and maybe a bit of a change, and we'll have a bit of a thought for them at the end. So this aircraft is coming down. If we just continue on with this little brief guide up here, you'll see that as they keep coming closer and closer, you'll see at 8:43 p.m. the tower changes them to this other runway. They accept it. Blue streak 5342. Can you take runway 33? Yeah, we can do 33 is the reply. So they've just immediately come back and changed that, and all of those things that I just told you are now got to take place, and you can see how close that aircraft is on that graphical display now to the actual runway. So now we've got one pilot down in the box, he's programming it, and we've got one flying and trying to realign with a new runway. Okay, so a couple of minutes later, the air traffic control again is now talking to the Black Hawk helicopter. They're controlling both sort of aircraft. You've got a Black Hawk that's coming up this river. Its call sign is PAT 25, and the tower operator says, PAT 25, do you have that CRJ? Do you have that Canadian regional jet, the American Airlines, in sight? Now these guys are doing an evaluation exercise, and I believe they would be visual but flying with night vision goggles, because they've got a different doctrine and mindset. We'll talk about that in a second. So the traffic controller says, have you got that CRJ in sight? Still haven't replied. PAT 25 passed behind that aircraft. So I want you to just keep extending. Don't cut across in front of those approaching aircraft. I want you to pass behind it. Confirm you can see it. Again, no reply and no information. Now here 8:47. So that's how quick it was. Just a quick couple of calls. It wasn't even like there was no stress in the voice. That was the actual audio. I just heard it there. There's no real stress in the voice of the ATC. There's no acknowledgement from the helicopter as to, yeah, we understand, we're listening, we're even situationally aware. What are you talking about? No reply. And unfortunately, within, 10, 20 seconds later, this is the end result. And you'll see that big flash that's just occurred on the screen. So these two aircraft have collided. Casualties from both, 100%, no one survived. It looks like the CRJ, from what I've seen in the crash investigation, has actually come in, been destabilized. Either it's been clipped on the wing or the tail and has then gone inverted and then gone into the river and broken up into three sort of main sections is what I'm understanding. So there's another view of the actual flame and the ignition between the aviation fuel. So now then you've got that call out happening. So really tragic. And I just wanted to sort of touch on the military ops culture in that, and just knowing how they sort of operate. So the military, they get permission off the FAA to fly these procedures and fly into these areas. They still probably lodge a flight plan. I'm assuming they would, even though they're visual and they're VFR, but they're coming into controlled airspace. So they definitely would notify FAA that they're coming in at this time and this is what they intend to do, track this way, that way, etc. The obligation on them is obviously to maintain situational awareness, be on the radio, be active and proactive as well. And but the FAA doesn't know whether they're flying with NVGs. They don't know whether they're under instruction, whether they're doing a renewal. There's three on board. There's a captain who's I think there's a staff sergeant and a warrant officer too are on board. From what I can see, the warrant officer looks like the most experienced out of the three, and he may have been the evaluating officer. So from what I'm led to believe in the media, and again, the two males have been identified publicly, and their background and their flight history and career has been published, but the captain who was on board, who I believe may have been the one that was under evaluation or been, who knows, you just don't know. Again, not sure. Their background and details are pretty scant. The family doesn't want those released at the moment. So again, that's potentially a bit of an issue too. But so just talking about the culture with the military ops, they'll have a set of operational orders. They'll have a briefing. They'll be talking about what they're going to do on this evaluation flight. And they will also be potentially trying to create, unlike the commercial operation, they're trying to create some sort of operational scenario basis. So they're going to be telling the crew that, look, we're going to pretend this is like a night VFR flight. You're under night vision goggles, procedures. So you've got limited visibility. You're going to probably use a lot of waypoints and markings, and you're going to enter an egress or something, and some sort of tactical reason that they're doing this operation, as well as an evaluation on their other procedures in the helicopter. Again, the mindset is totally different. They're not actually thinking 200% about efficiency, safety, and passengers on board the aircraft that they have. They're doing a different function altogether. So they've got a military mindset. They're on a training exercise, and it's simulating some sort of military operation or combat experience, let's say. Who knows what it is. So from the get-go, you've got a mismatch, and from me personally, why the hell would you have military aircraft anywhere near commercial operations? You have 40, 50, 100 ton plus jets with hundreds of people on board and thousands of litres of fuel flying in at high speed, way higher speed than these helicopters, coming in on set procedures into these approaches. The visual approach side of things, we've already canvassed that. That's a threat. That's an issue. But now you've got a military aircraft doing a training exercise or an evaluation op, flying into commercial airspace, right under the flight path of commercial jets. And for me, and anyone objectively, common sense would say that's just stupidity. And I definitely think there's been a lot of, the media are still sort of dumbfounded where they're going, oh, we need to get an investigation and have a look at some of these things and what are the factors, how can you draw a conclusion? Well, any imbecile can draw a conclusion there that there's no reason. What is the operational need? What is the commercial need to have a Black Hawk helicopter coming up a river and cutting across the final approach path of airliners as they're coming into a major airport? There's no reason for it, unless you've got a terrorist threat that's happening now and they've really got to come in and, you've got to look at the cost benefit. What's the cost benefit? Well, the benefit is, yeah, they get some real world, they can follow a river and there's a busy airspace and they can maneuver in there and they can be evaluated. The cost is, potentially, is that you've got, real people and real lives, as we've seen, that are just trying to get from A to B. There was figure skaters on board, no doubt there was business persons, potentially, like all different walks of life. Politicians, there was children on board. They've never even had a chance to live their life, and it's been cut short now because of this tragedy. So I think that really needs to be looked at. And I'm just going to give you a couple of scenarios. So I was flying along once and I saw a TCAS indication come up for another aircraft, sort of 45 degrees off, less than 1,000 feet below the aircraft I was in. It came on for about a minute out of the blue, but because I, try to maintain pretty much vigilant TCAS situational awareness, and I've had an issue like that before, a near sort of miss back home in Australia, so I'm very conscious of that, and so I'm sort of scanning and increasing the range of the TCAS and reducing it and having a look, etc. Anyway, so I see this aircraft coming through and then it disappears. A minute later, I'm going, hang on, this thing was within 5 miles of where we were, coming at us at speed. So then I still, even though the TCAS had deregistered, I still maintained sort of visual reference on where it should have been. And sure enough, I see this little black dot. And this thing gets faster and closer and closer and closer and then just scoots underneath us. And it was an F-15 fighter. And this was a military operation, obviously. This guy was on some sort of ferry flight, training flight. I don't know what he or she were doing in that aircraft. However, there's nearly 100 people on board this airliner. It's full of fuel. And now we have an aircraft that just exposes itself briefly to see if there's going to be some sort of conflict. They would have visual on us because obviously they know we're there, and let's say they'll paint there. They'll probably even have active radar on board that thing, but we don't know. So again, that's a major risk. That's a major threat. And these guys and girls are just operating in this civilian airspace with their own set of rules and regulations. And again, that it's something that is not, it just doesn't sit well when you've got people that are the actual taxpayers and the civilians that are on board these professional commercial jets that are being exposed potentially to this. Another example I can give you as well is you go into Arizona and you're taxiing, you're waiting to take off, and everybody holds short. There's other aircraft, they're all waiting to go, all these commercial airliners, and here's 6 F-16s from the Air National Guard doing touch and go practice in the middle of the day, and none of them are flying, they're not flying a set procedure. Some of them are doing brake turns in on final, and everybody's waiting, and all these commercial operations are trying to take place. Okay, if that's that's a split airbase, I think, between civilian and military, but there's a time and place. Or if you're going to go and do touch and goes, there's so many dedicated military bases, probably within 5-minute flight time of that particular one. Take off and go and do all the touch and goes you want at your military airbase, and keep out of the commercial airspace. You've got passenger jets taking off and landing in amongst all of these military fighters. It's impressive to watch because you're watching, military jets come in and off they go again, but it's unnecessary. I'm looking at it from a, commercial operation perspective going, what are they doing there? All of that jet fuel that's just being wasted by all these, a line of jets all waiting to take off, other ones waiting to land while these guys and girls are practicing, they're touch and goes. So that's another Another sort of factor, and another example I can give you, which relates to a Black Hawk as well, San Diego. So another example I can give you is San Diego. There's only one runway there, and maybe 10 aircraft trying to taxi and take off at the same time, and you've got at least 10 or 20 trying to land at the same time. And taxiing along, next minute, within 500 feet away and 500 feet above, here's this Black Hawk helicopter, Coast Guard with the orange and white markings. And they're and the next minute the tower is going, yeah, Coast Guard, identify yourself, what are you doing? And they said, oh yeah, they hadn't even got on the radio yet, but finally they get on and say, look, we're just here holding, we want to cross over the airport to go to the other side. So they just said, yeah, look, just hold, we've got aircraft landing at the moment, blah, blah. When there was a bit of a gap, then air traffic control said, yeah, okay, you can cross over the airport, maintain like 1,000 feet or whatever it was directly over the center line, the center of the runways. Why? There was no emergency. These guys weren't going to do a rescue or anything. They just wanted to cross from A to B, whatever it was, whether it was a training exercise, a ferry flight, whatever they were doing, maintenance, I don't even care. Why are they even there? Go and fly outside. There should be some sort of VFR procedure where you're way down low and you're way away from that terminal environment, and go about your business. But anyway, so that's some of the things that I've sort of noticed that I think is a bit of an issue, and hopefully they're going to have a look at some of this stuff and get it resolved. So looking at the aftermath of this, if you just bring up here on the screen, I'm not sure how clear it is, but this is the flight crew, unfortunately, of the American Airlines flight, and sympathies go out to these families. We've got Captain Jonathan Campos, age 34, First Officer Sam Lilly, 29, Flight Attendant Danacia Elder, and then Flight Attendant Ian Epstein. And again, hitting close to home, it's a very, very small community. And I had a friend ring me that evening who was flying for another regional airline, and basically spoke to me on the phone and said, listen, we just took off from Wichita the same time as this other crew. They were actually on the airport shuttle with us, and they were parked at the gate next to us before they left. So this other pilot was actually, understandably shaken up, and the whole community is shaken up from this because there hasn't been an incident in the United States since 2009 with an airliner. So the safety record is there, but I believe it's something that needs to be addressed and have a look at from a holistic approach. You can draw conclusions straight away as to the factors that are responsible for this. And I had this other thing that I've got on my other laptop here. I just wanted to just touch on this. There was there's a 747 captain who's retired who got on a comment section pretty much when this incident happened. And this is this other person's opinion, but it's potentially relevant because this person was an international captain and flew all across the world. The whole USA aviation sector needs root and branch reform. There have been so many near misses in recent years that this accident was inevitable. It was just a question of when. The majority of people inside the system don't realize how bad it is because that's all they've ever known. We have American contributors here who routinely tell us it's okay to switch to traffic advisory only to avoid nuisance. So what this person's saying is if we do have a warning on the aircraft, we can see them visually, we can just avoid them and disregard some of these advisory messages. The United States Air Traffic Control think it's acceptable to slam dunk a heavy jet, and then they get shirty when foreign operators refuse a questionable clearance. Literally forgot about an aircraft once it has accepted a visual separation. So this is the other thing. So air traffic control basically want to get rid of you. So they're going to say, in America, they're going to say, can you see the runway? Yes, runway's in sight. If that happens, from that point on, they're going to say, you're cleared the visual approach and see you later. Now maintain visual separation yourself. Well, hang on, I'm doing 300 kilometers an hour. How am I going to maintain visual separation with another aircraft that's maybe doing 200-300 kilometers an hour coming at me? That's just stupidity. The closing rate is that fast. You've got 600, 800 kilometers closing rate and I'm going to maintain visual separation. It doesn't work like that unless the visibility is so clear. These major cities, all they've got is smoke, haze everywhere. So it's never it's very rarely that it's actually a super clear day. And even then, you've got to try to pick out this aircraft, this little speck in amongst all these buildings and terrain. Like anyway, it's another issue. This pilot continues on. I operated the 747-400 around the planet for over a decade. The USA was one of the most threat-laden environments we went to. Lovely people, just insane procedures. In that time, I experienced a TCAS RA on vectors to JFK, was sent around and put in a hold as punishment on short final in Miami for refusing land and hold short procedures. Had major super high workload approaches to San Francisco. That's very relatable. Combined with the crazy policy of pairing aircraft, so aircraft side by side, parallel operations on approach. On most of the planet, the human is the last line of defense in a multi-layered safety environment. In the United States, the human is often the only line of defense. While the environment they are in is super high workload, significantly reducing their capacity to trap safety issues. That's the other factor as well. It's a super busy airspace. It's pretty much the most busy airspace in the world. So air traffic control, they do a great job. I believe that they're overworked. You can hear it in their voice. They're probably understaffed. There's questions raised about, whether people are being hired for merit or whatever, but that's another issue as well. But yeah, so I just think it's something that's, been a tragedy. It shouldn't happen again in this sort of same scenario, because there's no reason for military or non-commercial operations to be flying around near the approaches and departures of these major airports. So there should be no reason for joy flights and all these sort of things. Like, yes, we want to have the airspace is there to be utilized, but in some instances, sharing it is not viable. And especially when you have these, busy airports in the US where you're just coming in and out, and you've got to try to do your best. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is, the impact is here, and I've got victims and DVI. So that DVI stands for disaster victim identification. So we often sort of think about, the actual victims that were on board both aircraft, but a big impact and a big stressor for besides family and friends, which obviously this is just a devastating time. People have lost their children. I heard a father on the radio recently talking about him and his wife had adopted sons from Korea, and one of them was like a prodigy in the ice skating world, I believe, in the sporting world somewhere. I believe it was ice skating because that was what was said. And I'm not sure if this fellow has lost his wife and his child on board that incident. Just heartbreaking to hear him, talking about it. But things that we often forget as well is that in the background you can see up on the screen is all of these emergency workers now that have to. You can see the tents are set up. This is all for disaster victim identification. So now they've got to, we're talking about obviously gruesome sort of scene. There's 67 bodies that they've got to pull out of this river, and they've got to go through them. They're all different walks of life and different injuries that have happened to them. So these people are going to be potentially physically scarred if they get injured. Going through all the debris. There'll be police divers and military divers and everything in between in there, but also psychologically they're going to be going through a tough time. So I just wanted to sort of, just touch on that air disaster and talk about it, and talk about some of the things that are relevant, and give a couple of examples of, like this really does happen, and this is an issue, and hopefully we can start to look for some change and get some comments from the people that are able to have a look at this, and anyone who's out there, if they've got a comment, I'd love to hear from you. But the last thing I'd like to do is just put out a quick prayer for the victims of this the crash, and the families. I think they're going through hell at the moment. The funerals are all taking place sort of this week for a lot of them, but there's still some that haven't been recovered and identified. So if we can just say a quick prayer now. O God of spirits and of all flesh, who hast trampled down death and overthrown the devil and given life to thy world. Do thou the same, Lord. Give rest to the souls of thy departed servants in a place of brightness, a place of refreshment, a place of repose, where all sickness, sighing, and sorrow has fled away. Pardon every transgression which they have committed, whether by word or deed or thought, for thou art a good God and lovest mankind, because there is no man who lives yet does not sin, for thou art without sin. Thy righteousness is to all eternity, and thy word is truth. For thou art the resurrection, the life, and the repose of thy servants who have fallen asleep. O Christ our God, and unto thee we ascribe glory, together with thy Father, who is from everlasting, and thine all holy, good, and life-creating Spirit, now and ever unto ages of ages. Amen. So I just wanted to just say that if we can just have a bit of a thought for these people, and as we look forward, then I guess the last thing I would like to say is especially if anyone sort of at the moment, it's, even though it's preliminary investigation and there's a lot of people saying, well, hang on, we can't draw conclusions at the moment, we don't know, etc. No, look, we know. We've got air traffic audio recordings, we've got video footage, direct evidence of what's happened. We know what factors have led to this. We each aircraft is sending out via its transponder its height, its altitude, its speed. Calculations can be drawn. The fact that they didn't even reply, this helicopter didn't even reply twice to our air traffic control, and and ATC as well, changing the aircraft at the last minute. There's a combination of blames. I think the only aircraft that's potentially without blame and crew is the poor crew of the American Airlines CRJ, because look, they're just trying to accommodate. They're changing runways at the last second. They're doing their best, but here's 3 people flying a multi-million-dollar military helicopter doing a training exercise in their flight path. Unnecessary. So anyway, hopefully that gets resolved soon. But anyway, hopefully this is sort of informative for you guys. And just a bit of a topical thing. And I've got a few other things as they sort of crop up I can sort of expand upon and chat. So yeah, this is a good little chat. If you can please like, subscribe, share it out. I would like to sort of build up this channel, and it can only sort of build through your sort of help and support. But anyway, take care and be safe out there. We'll talk soon. See ya.